Thanks for following along, and tell me, why are some people so shady that they cannot just be honest? Knowing some of you have been through the worst in relationships, tell me, what would you do in a case of public cheating like this? She says,
The Mykonos millionaire. The morning I found out about Jessica, I was making Mark's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, the expensive kind he insisted on. My phone buzzed with a notification from his Instagram story. There they were. My husband of 8 years and my former yoga instructor, sipping champagne on what looked like a very expensive yacht. The caption read, "New adventures with my goddess." I burned the pancakes. 3 weeks later, I'm standing on the deck of the Celebrity Eclipse, watching the sun set over the Aegean Sea, trying not to check his social media every 5 minutes. The divorce papers are in my cabin, along with a bottle of Greek wine I bought in duty-free. I was planning to drink myself into oblivion when this man approached me at the ship's rail. "You look like someone contemplating whether to throw their phone overboard," he said in accented English, his voice warm with humor. He was maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of tan that comes from actually living by the sea, not a salon. "I'm Dimitri, and before you ask, yes, I'm Greek, and no, I don't own a restaurant." I laughed despite myself. "What do you own then?" "Several restaurants, actually, and a small hotel, some olive groves. My ex-wife got the house in Athens, but I kept the good stuff." He gestured toward Mykonos, which was getting closer by the hour. "Are you planning to enjoy the island, or are you going to spend the whole time staring at whatever's making you so sad on that phone?" I told him about Mark, about Jessica, about how I'd used our joint savings account to book this cruise as a final act of rebellion before the lawyers divided everything up. Dimitri listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic noises. "Your husband is an idiot," he said finally. "But his loss is Greece's gain. Have you ever had real Greek food? Not the tourist stuff? I mean food that makes you understand why we've survived as a civilization for 3,000 years? The next morning, instead of following the cruise excursion to the typical tourist spots, I met Dimitri at the port. He led me through narrow cobblestone streets to a tiny taverna, where an elderly woman greeted him with enthusiastic Greek and suspicious looks at me.
"My Aunt Sophia," he explained. "She's convinced every woman I bring here is after my money." "Are they?" I asked. "Usually, yes, but you're different. You're here to heal, not to hunt." "She got her wish," he said, refilling my wine glass with a local rosé that tasted like flowers and sunshine. "But I got mine too. I kept the life I loved." After lunch, he took me to his hotel, a beautiful white building overlooking the harbor with blue shutters and bougainvillea cascading down the walls. "This was my grandmother's house," he explained. "I turned it into a small hotel when the tourists started coming to Mykonos. 8 rooms, each one different." He showed me through the property, pointing out architectural details, telling stories about guests who'd stayed there, sharing his dreams of expanding to include a cooking school. In the garden, overlooking the sea, he'd set up a small table with coffee and baklava made by Sophia. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I asked. "You don't even know me." "Because 3 years ago, I was standing on a dock in Piraeus, wondering if I should throw myself into the water or just my wedding ring," he said. A stranger, an American tourist actually, bought me coffee and listened to me complain about my life for 2 hours. She probably saved my life that day. I never got to thank her properly. We spent the afternoon on his private boat, a beautiful wooden vessel that had belonged to his father. He taught me to steer while he pointed out hidden coves and told me local legends. We swam in water so clear I could see my feet, ate fresh figs from trees growing on remote beaches, and watched the sunset paint the white buildings of Mykonos golden. I have to ask, are you always this generous with random divorced tourists? He was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to say that the gods send us exactly what we need when we need it most. That evening, instead of returning to the cruise ship, I had dinner with Dimitri's extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends filled a long table at another family taverna. They welcomed me like I'd been part of their lives forever, pressing food on me, teaching me Greek phrases, sharing stories and laughter that needed no translation. Dimitri's cousin Elena, who spoke perfect English, sat beside me. "He likes you," she said. "We can tell because he's not trying to impress you with his success. He's showing you his heart instead." "I just got divorced," I protested. "I'm not ready for anything serious." "Who said anything about serious?" She laughed. "But healing? Healing, you can start anytime. The next day, we walked among trees that were hundreds of years old and heavy with fruit. He showed me how to taste olive oil properly, how to tell good oil from mediocre. "This is what lasts," he said, pressing a bottle of his finest oil into my hands. "Not marriages that break at the first storm, not promises that dissolve when someone prettier comes along. This endures." 6 months later, I used half my divorce settlement to buy a one-way ticket to Athens. Dmitri met me at the airport with Sophia's homemade cookies and a smile that made me remember what hope felt like. I've been living in Mykonos for a year now, helping Dmitri expand his hotel and learning to make olive oil from his grandmother's trees. Mark called last month. Apparently, Jessica left him for someone with more money, and he wanted to work things out. I was in the middle of harvesting olives with Dmitri's family, my hands stained with honest work, surrounded by people who chose to love me every day. "I'm sorry," I told him, "but I'm too busy living my actual life to pretend to care about yours anymore." Sometimes the best revenge isn't succeeding in spite of someone. It's succeeding because you finally stopped letting them define your worth.